In late August, a commission to gather facts regarding the Lewiston tragedy released their final report. This afternoon, Governor Mills held a press conference to speak on her reaction of the document. Keenan Mills has more from the State House.
So I stand before you today to say that I have full faith and confidence in the facts as determined by the Commission, and I agree with the conclusions that the Commission has reached.
In the final report of the independent commission to investigate the facts of the tragedy in Lewiston, they found that Robert Card's U.S. Army Reserve Unit, as well as the Saginaw Sheriff's Office, had opportunities to prevent the mass shooting that took the lives of 18 people.
At its core, this tragedy was caused by a colossal failure of human judgment by several people on several occasions, a profound negligence that, as the Commission rightly stated, was an abdication of responsibility.
The Commission did not include any recommendations for actions to be taken in their final report. Governor Mills spoke on the work that her administration has done since October 25th. One was the strengthening of Maine's Extreme Risk Protection Order law. It allows law enforcement to take a person into custody under unusual circumstances and remove their firearms. According to Governor Mills, it has been used 330 times across Maine in the 318 days since the tragedy.
It's clear that following last year's tragedy, more and more law enforcement officers across the state are taking our extreme risk protection law seriously. They've taken state-provided training on its use, and they're using it now on a daily basis to remove firearms from those who should not have them.
While Mills said the Army Reserve and the Sheriff's Office should have and could have done more to address warnings from the shooter and his family members about him being armed and dangerous, she did not say what actions should be taken against them. She did say that Saginaw County voters should review all of the reports when they vote on a new sheriff in November. At a national level, the governor has been in contact with the U.S. Secretary of Defense to consider taking laws such as the Risk Protection Law to a national and military level. Keenan Mills, WABI TV5 News, Augusta.